Hi, welcome to week 2 of After Effects. What is it called? Make a move. Alright, anyways. So let's go ahead and fire up After Effects and we will do a brief overview of last week again. I don't want to spend too much time in review. I'm assuming you all kind of basically remember the ideas. I think by the end of last week we had built a block that bounced up and down and we tried to make a solar system. We'll do that again real quick, and but just so we can kind of move on, I want to teach you other kind of little one-off fun things that will hopefully keep building out your tools. So I'm going to do a new project. And I need a new composition. And if you guys remember, over here in the project panel, the new composition button is this tiny little film strip with these colored shapes in there. Create a new composition. And I think by default it will remember your last settings, so you can, like, if you liked your last settings for your last composition, you can just keep making new ones. I'm going to make the background color white. And there it is. So we had a quick question about how to change the anchor point. If you guys want to remember, there is a tool literally that changes your anchor point. Let me draw a shape here and then we can mess with this anchor point. So I'll make a square, and as you see, by default the anchor point shows up in the middle of your composition, and that's what that little target symbol there is. To move that is this, it's called pan behind, but then they put anchor point in parentheses. I call it the anchor point tool because I use it for that much more than I use pan behind. So again, as always in After Effects, you always have to click the layer you want to affect first. If you just kind of start moving around, you're going to start moving around the wrong layer, the wrong shape. So just always be aware that, like, whatever frame you're on, you're going to affect, and whatever layer you're on, you're going to affect. So like in this example, if I'm on that rectangle, I'm going to move around the anchor point of that rectangle itself. But if I'm on the layer, I can move the anchor point of that layer. So there's kind of two different things going at work here. It's this tool up here, pan behind / anchor point. Y is the shortcut because. So I click on the shape layer because I don't want to move the rectangle's anchor point, because by default that's in the center already, and I kind of like things just in the center so that it scales and moves kind of based on itself. I want to make sure the shape layer's anchor point is related to that rectangle. I can move that around, and remember, once you click and start dragging, if you hold command, it will jump to particular points of a shape. So if you wanted to jump to the middle, then go ahead and hold command when you're dragging it, and it'll put it in the middle. Control, I believe. For those of you who are new, we do have a couple of handouts there that's got keyboard shortcuts and an overview of kind of easing in and out.
How do you set it into frames instead of
What's that?
how do you set it to frames instead of seconds?
Yeah, that keeps coming up. Depends on how zoomed in you are. If you're zoomed out, it'll show seconds. If you zoom in, it'll go to frames. Right? Didn't you figure that out?
Yeah, I think, or you can switch by, putting the cursor there and then clicking. I think there's a key for that, but I forgot what it was. I think shift maybe?
Katie would know.
Yeah?
Is that working for you when you zoom in? It turns to frames? And timeline zooming is plus and minus. Because when I'm zoomed out, it's at seconds. And if I zoom in, it turns into frames.
I have a question. Can you have multiple compositions within the same project?
Definitely.
And what's the best way of saving? Is it better to have like multiple compositions in the same project? What are the sort of best practices in terms of saving the work?
I would say each composition should be its own kind of like contained animation. So like if that set of words does a certain thing, then you can, it's called pre-compose. You turn it into a composition, and then that can kind of live within a bigger composition that incorporates all of those kinds of things. That's generally how I do it. So like, I don't know if you remember the words moving around video from last week. I made the first part of that page one composition because all the words came for that one, and then the second page that slid up afterwards, that was a second composition that just kind of slid into place. So that was one composition with two pre-compositions within it. Anything else? I was going to bounce this real quick if you guys remember. It's keyframes, and that was a new concept last week as well, and we spent some time on keyframes. Your first keyframe is going to be on your first frame of the timeline, and to set another keyframe, you have to go later in your timeline. You can't keep adding different values on the same keyframe because it'll only remember the last one. So let's say I go down to 1 second or so, and I'll add another keyframe. There's a few ways to do that, but this is the Add Keyframe button. So I now have two keyframes. They're the same, so nothing's happening, but I want to go somewhere in the middle and move my rectangle up so that it would bounce. And that's when I would do that. If I hold Shift, it'll make sure it goes directly straight up. And now my timeline, if I go back to the beginning, it's going to bounce. Just once. But that was kind of the basic lesson to get us going last week with keyframes. And also that work area is another important part. If you want to see your animation looping, you need to bring your work area to just what you're working on. And that's in the timeline. You can either drag in this blue bar all the way back. There's also keyboard shortcuts for that. B and N. B will start your work area, and N will be the end of your work area. So you can kind of start getting the hang of, hey, start B and N because I just want to see that part of my animation going. So now my work area is shorter, so I can see it looping a bit. And then the next thing we did is we did easy ease to all of these. And that's a particular automated feature in After Effects that's going to say, hey, your animation is going to slowly come from one keyframe and ease into the next one for you. It's just going to do that graph thing automatically for you. And to do that, where was it in the menu? I always forget. Always know the shortcuts. Keyframe assistant. Yeah. Okay.
If you right-click the layer bar down there, the blue shape layer, it should show up under keyframe assistant.
It's also down here. Yep. So if I take these keyframes, again, just starting to get used to right-click everything, right-click all the things, because that gives you that menu that's going to let you see, hey, I want to easy ease all of these, and not in and out. I just want easy ease, and that's going to do both in and out. And now my block's going to bounce a little more stylized. And that's great. We have a bouncing block. The next thing we did is we went into the graph editor, which is this button here. And that lets you see those curves that was on cubicbezier.com. And that's, if you mess with the curve, that's how you can kind of say, hey, I want that block to bounce and kind of hang in the air a little longer. So it's like, hey, I'm at the top of my jump, and now I'm back down. You need to change your curves in order to make that animation happen. Again, raise your hand if you have any questions. Katie is around, and she is a master of this stuff. It's better than I, for sure. For me, all right.
Can you be more specific about what you can do when you're in the graph editor, like which direction you can go and what that actually does to the shape or whatever?
Yeah, so this version of the graph editor is the value graph editor. So you're adjusting how quickly it moves from one value to the next. So if you look here, this green one is the y-axis, and that's why you can kind of see that's the bounce of it. So this is 800 pixels is the y-axis bottom, and 300 or so pixels is the y-axis at the top. So if I change that curve, it's going to go from 800 to 300 at a different rate. So I can make it go faster up there, I can make it go slower up there. And what I want to do with this very top point is make it hang out at 300 longer. So I need to make the curve a little more flat there, which is actually saying, hey, the value here should hang around 300 more often. And to do that with position, you have to split your x and y axis so that I can just affect the y. And that's what this button here always is. Separate dimensions. And when I do that, it kind of resets my easy ease, which is fine. I just want to go and affect my y position in that top mark there. So just that keyframe. I want to turn it into, I'm out of space here. What's going on? I don't need this stuff right now. I want to turn that into an easy ease, right? So I can click the easy ease button here. The shortcut for easy ease on a Mac, this is the button you never use. It's the FN in the bottom left. FN F9 will turn a point into an easy ease automatically. That's your shortcut for it. And now I'll bring up my curves. So now I can drag on these handles and change that curve.
Is that FN F9? Or just
FN F9. So F9 is at the top. You have to hit the function key in order to actually use it as a function key. Yeah. And now that I can pull on my handles here, I've made that curve hang out around 300 a little longer because it's flatter there, right? And now when I animate it, it's going to slow down at the top. I click on it and you can hit the easy ease button, which is right here, and also function F9.
Is there an easy way to make it symmetrical on both sides?
They're always independent just because you might need that option. So you can break them. If you hold Alt, you can break them to do them separately like that. But in general, it's going to try to keep that curve natural for you. So do you turn it into an easy ease?
Yeah. Because I click on the square.
Yeah. Have you separated your dimensions? Do you have the X there? Is the red line there for you too?
Yes.
Okay, you need to separate your dimensions first. And that's this button here. So I'm just going to make this super extreme just for samples. All depends on what works for your animation, right? You can start to make some weird shapes here and that'll animate weird.
No, that's
That one kind of like floats down to the bottom before getting there.
yeah. So you don't want to be messing with x-axis. Yeah. I have a question.
Yes.
My easy ease thing is all grayed out.
Have you separated your dimensions? Do you have like the green and red lines right now?
Just the green and
Just green. And so then you click on a keyframe and that you can't hit these buttons? Okay, Katie's going to help you when she's done here.
Yeah. How does she get to the Bezier tool? I know how to
So, turning the keyframe into a easy ease frame.
Yeah. Like, how does she get the handles up?
I click the keyframe on hit easy ease.
She's got that, but her handles aren't coming up.
Also, the separate dimension is grayed out for me. That little button down there.
Well, she's already separated her dimensions.
Yeah.
But the little handles aren't showing up. It's like she clicked easy, so she's got like a curve, but her little handles aren't showing up.
Mm-hmm. Let me take a look. Why don't you check out what Ashley's doing? Sounds like the same thing.
Yeah, both of ours are like so weird.
Okay, so
Well, 'cause hers are
you're
showing
working with a few things right now, position and scale.
Oh, how did I get
I don't know. It's so now it's just position. Then you can separate. Now you're on
And then we're done.
X and Y.
Oh,
Now we
okay,
can go to
so
the Y.
you're on
Alright.
Make sure
And there's
you're
your
not on the
difference.
shape layer, and then you're actually on what you've got keyed. So now try
Yeah.
messing.
You see the two bars.
Yes.
Stuff.
Yeah, so you're on the position, and it's this button. That's so you can have X do something different with the curve, and Y can do something.
So just make sure that you're on your the layer.
The red line is just the X's.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the X's curve right now. And so yours is going that way, across the screen, so that's what that value is right there.
Yeah.
Pretty constant. Anytime your curve is just a straight line, that's just constant.
Oh, first separate your stuff.
Yeah, I'm not doing
One
it.
is the bottom.
I'm just doing it. Cool.
So then you click that, and now you have your handles.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very particular. It's a bit, if anybody's played with Illustrator, it's like, do this exactly the right way or I'm going to screw you over. Like, don't click anything that shouldn't be clicked. Just only work on exactly the keyframe you want, exactly the frame on the timeline, exactly the, in this case, Y position. Don't have Y position and X position selected, or else you're going to start messing with both of them. One of the issues over here was position and scale were both selected, so like it was just like, hey, you want to do position and scale because you clicked on them. Like sometimes you might want to do that, but in general, you just want to do one thing at a time, because it's already hard enough as it is. So.
Would in this case, would it matter if you did both X and Y since the X doesn't change at all?
Technically, no. You should be able to get in there and easy ease just the keyframe of the Y, because you separated them, right?
But if you did both of them, like, would anything happen? Just because you're not even changing the position of the X in this scenario?
Well, it could get kind of funky because if you were to mess with the curves on
It
your
doesn't let you, because the X and the Y keyframe are shared now, and you can't mess with the curve of the Y separately from X.
and if you were just to mess with the X, even though it's not changing, it would still affect the curves around it. So if you manage to jump that up, it could.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I add a new keyframe, the red dash, it like goes all the way to the end of the timeline, and then I have to drag it back.
Still take a look. Yeah, position is actually those two things, X and Y, all the time. So you always need to separate your dimensions if you really want to get with your curves. But that's the bouncing block. Pretty good there. Let's go and try to do our solar system again just real quick. I think we ran into some speed bumps on the way.
Oh, I don't think that's for sure.
But in general, we were making circles as planets.
I can look it up then.
So I'll make a big one. I'm gonna make it orange for the sun. Again, you make a shape with the shape tool that's here. And if you want to make rectangles, you hold down on that and you can kind of pull open that drawer to see what different kinds of shape tools there are. The ellipse tool is gonna make the circles for you. And across the top is your settings for fill and stroke. So I make a little orange sun. Pretty good. And the one thing that's very particular, again, with the After Effects is if I draw another circle here, it's going to add that circle to the same shape layer. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep my shapes on their own shape layer. So the reason why that happens is because after you make a shape, it automatically selects your shape layer. So it's like, hey, keep making shapes in this layer. You actually want to click off of the shape layer so that you can start a fresh one. And then when you make a circle, it'll be separate. So now I have two shape layers, shape layer 1, shape layer 2. And this was Mercury, and somebody said it was, what color, what did we make it? Red? Alright. Is Mercury red?
I feel like it's like,
Oranges?
yeah. 'Cause Mars is red, right? Is Mercury blue?
No,
One
it's
of them's
not.
foggy.
Juliana, what's Mercury's color?
But Venus is orange. Oh, Mercury's
It's like yellowish, right?
it's yellowish or gray, according to these pictures.
Alright, we'll go yellowish gray. That's ugly, but... Okay, so that's my Mercury. And then, again, I'm going to click off of that layer because I want to start one more layer. I'm going to make a tiny little moon here. I know Mercury doesn't have a moon, but we're going to give it one. And that's going to be straight gray. Sad little moon there. Okay, so I think what we ran into last week was we were rotating these things around each other, and it just kind of became chaos, because in general, I think you want to make the rotation around the sun one long, slow one, so that the rotation of the moon around the planet is a little faster, and you can kind of see that in action as it goes around the sun. So let's do the moon around the planet first. And I'm going to rename my layers. Again, you just click on a layer, hit enter, that lets you rename your layers. So I want my moon to rotate around Mercury. So that means I need to parent my moon to Mercury. And parenting were these options here. So on my moon layer, right now it has no parent. I'm going to tell it your daddy is Mercury. So now if I go into the circle of Mercury, and I can click on it just to kind of jump to there with that selection tool. Transform ellipse. When I rotate, no, that's not working.
I think you have to
It's the
click on
path.
layer.
Yeah, it's not the content. Ignore what I just said. And that's where we need to set our anchor point, right? So your anchor point should be in the middle of your planet. So I need to drag Mercury's anchor point to the center of Mercury. And now when I rotate the layer of Mercury, the moon goes around it. And that's just a preview. Again, I need to do all of this with keyframes. So I'm going to keyframe that rotation. The first frame is just where it is. And I'm going to go, I don't know, let's make a 6-second rotation. I'm going to add another keyframe. Shortcuts for keyframes. Remember, it's on this cheat sheet over there if you want to get it. R is the rotation shortcut to look at the rotation. If you hit Alt when you hit R, that's like, hey, add a keyframe at that point in time. So I can hit Alt R, and that will add or remove a keyframe to everything, just to Mercury. And I haven't added any rotation yet. It's still just 0, 0 at both places. Let's say I want it to go around, I don't know, 6 times. 6x. So that moon is flying around Mercury. And then we want these two to then go around the sun once, very slowly. At least slower than the moon is going right now. So I need to take Mercury and give it a parent as well. So I'll take Mercury Again, with the parent options here, put it to the sun. Then I go to my sun, check my anchor point, make sure it's in the middle of my sun. For those shortcut wizards already, that's Y, click and drag, and then hold command, and that'll bounce it to the middle exactly.
Or control for Windows. Yeah.
Control for Windows. There's just, yeah. So a little preview. I know that when I rotate my sun, it is rotating those guys, which is good. So I'm going to turn on rotation keyframes for the sun. So again, that's the stopwatch. It's also Alt-R. That'll add that keyframe. Yeah.
Timeline goes from 0 to 12.
Yeah.
Have the 2, 4, 6, 8.
That just depends on your zoom level. Plus and minus will do your zoom in and out of your timeline.
The moon is attached to Mercury, right? So now our Mercury does the moon also does. So if you want it to spin, you just have to spin Mercury.
So I'm going to go to the end of those 6 seconds, and I just want it to go around the moon once. So I'm going to say 1 time for rotation, and that will automatically add a keyframe. Whenever you change a value, it will add a keyframe. And now I've got a little better solar system going here. If I thought the moon was going in the wrong direction, I can go to the last keyframe. It's at 6. If I hit -6, that will reverse the direction of the moon.
Because that was sort of like, okay, it's circulating now. Yeah. So that exactly. Same kind of thing we did for that. But
How are we doing? Okay, that was a brief overview of last week. You can watch a video from last week if you want to really brush up, but let's start something new. And I think these are fun. They're just kind of little tool belt things that can spice up some stuff. These first ones, I don't know what they're formally called. I call them fireworks circles. They're just kind of like a burst of a circle that kind of dissipates like a firework. So let's start a new composition. I'm going to hit that again, film strip there. That'll bring up my default options. Those are fine. Actually, I'm going to change my background color to black because fireworks are usually at night. So let's give it a nice black background.
Can you change the background color later, or does it have to be?
Yeah, you can always go in, and if you control click on the composition settings will come back up for you. You can change them there.
An important thing to remember though is that no matter what your background color is, it's not going to render if it's a background. And so it's like if you're trying to export an image sequence, it's going to give you like a transparency instead of that color. So I don't know if you've gone over solids yet, but you can also create, if you go to layer solid, that will give you just a block of color that you can render.
Based on what you want.
And that's also like Illustrator does that too, where it's like, here's white, but it's not actually there. It's transparent, but it's just white so you can see what you're doing. And that's the same thing with these compositions. So for starters, let's just make one firework, and that's going to be the ellipse tool again. I'm going to make a perfect circle. Again, holding down shift will keep your shapes perfectly round. And what we want to do with this is have no fill, and the stroke is what we're going to mess with. So let's go up to fill. Does anybody remember how to turn the fill off as you cycle through the different fills? Yeah, when you hold Option or Alt and click on fill, it'll go through different options. You want the red line through. That means no fill. And the stroke, the first one, I'm going to make blue. And 48, that's fine. That's what we're going to mess with, though.
It's not letting me choose the no fill.
Just hold Alt and cycle through it. Yeah. Alt. Yeah, Alt and click on it. That's just the stroke. I don't know, it just looks neon because the screen is probably badly doing rendering.
Teach me your ways.
We can add a neon effect later if we want. It doesn't look, it looks better on my screen than up there. I'm going to change the blue. It's too purple up there. I'll go more there. It does not look like that for me. Oh well. The color balance of our projectors are wrong. Don't trust them. Okay, so I've got a circle here. What we want to do is add a keyframe to our stroke. And we're going to make the stroke go from whatever we start with, like right now it's at 33, we'll mess with it, and down to 0. And that will kind of give us that dissipating way that a firework will kind of disappear in the sky. So to get down to that, we need to drill down in our shape layer. So keep clicking these triangles until you get down to contents, ellipse, stroke. And that you can see stroke width is 33. That's what it at default was just at. You can add keyframes to your stroke width. So let's go ahead and turn on the stopwatch so we add keyframes to the stroke. So the first one is going to be 33, and then I'm going to go for like, I don't know, 2 seconds or so. Add another keyframe, but put the stroke at 0. I'm going to hit N so that I'm looping just what I animated, and my work area is just at that section. So it's a little slow. It's a 2-second dissipating stroke. So it's just slowly. I might want to make that a little faster. And now I'll teach you the keyframe shortcut for nudging your keyframes left and right. Because up till now, you can always grab your keyframe and drag it. But if you're just wanting to do one frame at a time, select your keyframe.
Mine is at frames, not seconds, so and I've done plus and minus.
Hold Command when you click on your timeline, and that cycles through the different options. I don't know. If it says frames or seconds, it has no effect on your work or your animation, so I would just say don't worry about it.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how to like
As well.
put the keyframes at the same time here.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 frames at the same.
It would just be 48 if it was just frames. But again, we're going to slide around because animation is all about not landing on exact frames all the time. It's about what feels right. And I think you just kind of mess with your keyframes endlessly until like, oh, that feels right. So if I select just this keyframe and I hold down Alt and press the left or right arrows, that nudges that keyframe just 1 frame at a time. So I just want to slide that down. I think the firework is probably better at 1 second. So let me try a 1 second look. It's a little better. If you want to make your work area a little longer past the keyframe, just so you can kind of get the whole feel of what it feels like once it disappears. Okay, not bad. The other thing we want to do is change the scale and kind of do the opposite of the stroke. So your stroke is bigger and becoming 0. We want our scale to be 0 and become bigger, and that will let your circle kind of like blow up and become that firework effect. So go to your scale. The shortcut is you can hit S. That will bring up the scale right there in your transform options. It's also at the very bottom. If you drill down forever, it's in transform scale. So my first keyframe, I'm going to turn on the scale. I want to put it at 0%. So that actually that circle doesn't exist yet. It's 0% scale. And then throughout the course of that explosion, which was 1 second, I'm going to take it up to 100. So go down to 1 second and add 100. Not bad. If anybody can tell, my anchor point is not in the center of my circle, so it's kind of like blowing out to the left a little. That bothers me. And those are kind of like your workflow things that just start sticking in your brain, is always checking what layer am I on, what frame am I on in the timeline, where's my anchor point. Like, you just have all these mental checks where you always need to like go through, because whenever you play back and it looks weird, it's like, I didn't do my mental checks. You just kind of start to get the hang of like, I need to babysit all of these tiny little things all the time.
Well, an easy way, I actually didn't know this shortcut for the longest time, but if you just want to keep an eye on everything you've animated, but you don't want to have to deal with all the drop-down menus, click on your main layer and just hit the letter U.
Yep.
And it'll show you all the things that you've keyed. So like if you want things to match up or be slightly offset and you don't want to have to look at everything or accidentally key anything, that's a real quick and easy way to do that.
Mm-hmm. So again, click your layer and you hit U. That will say, hey, here's everything that's keyframed. Here's what you're messing with right now. A very common one, especially once you get very far down the path and you have this very complicated like shapes and words and things flying all over. You mostly only want to look at your keyframed stuff. So it's a great way to do that.
Can you do the transform scale?
Yes, definitely. I'll turn that up. Yeah, so the very first frame, right now, again, my firework stroke keyframes are about 1 second, that it goes from 33 to 0. On that first keyframe, I'm going to put the scale at 0. And I didn't add a keyframe. Let me turn on that stopwatch. You always got to turn on that stopwatch. Also, Alt-S will add a keyframe to scale for you. And then I'm going to come down to the other keyframe. And I know I'm always throwing shortcuts at you, but it's just the more you hear it, the more you get the hang of it. To jump around keyframes, use J and K. So K will go to the right keyframe, the next right keyframe, and J will go backwards to the previous keyframe. So I'm doing that a lot as well. Like if I just want to add a keyframe exactly where the same keyframe is for the stroke, I hit K to jump there, and I'm going to hit Alt-S to add a keyframe for scale. You could also manually hit it, but as you get better, you're just going to be typing your way through After Effects. You don't need to be manually hitting any button anymore. And that second scale needs to be 100 or whatever kind of ends up working for you. You know, in this case, it's not bad. So I can mess with this more. I think it's too skinny for me. I kind of want the stroke to be super fat at the beginning. So I'm going to go back to my first frame and take my stroke width up, and I'm going to like 75 even. Let's see what that looks like. And you can't see it because it's at 0 scale. So it's going to start out 75, this huge big fat stroke on there, but it's going to dissipate pretty quickly over the course of that. And I think it just gives that circle firework a little more meat at the beginning to shed as it goes through. I could even go higher. Let's go 120. Yeah. So whatever feels right to you. Again, it's always just like what's going to work for you. What story are you telling? What highlight are you making? And for things like this, I would not go and create a bunch of fireworks on their own. I would make one perfect firework and then just duplicate it a bunch, which is what we're going to do now. There's one more thing I want to do. I don't know if I want to do it. Let me see if it looks. It looks okay, but it's just kind of like when it goes from stroke, in this case it's going stroke 5 to 0, it's just kind of suddenly gone. It's not like super smooth in my mind. Just because it's 1 second, it's really zooming through that stroke movement there. I think I want the firework to also fade out just at the very end too, just to kind of like soften that disappearance. Because right now, literally, there is 1 frame where it's there and 1 frame where it's not. And ideally, that would be a stroke of 1 to 0, but right now it's jumping from 5 to 0, so it's a little like fast for me. So I'm going to add some keyframes on the, where is it? Opacity. And the shortcut for opacity is T for some reason. Think about opacity, and that'll hopefully make it stick in your head. So opacity, I don't want it to go from 100 to 0 at the same rate as the firework. I want it to go from 100 to 0 just at the end, maybe the last few frames. And again, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to put it in there and then mess with it to see what feels right. So I'm going to add a keyframe for opacity at 100. I'm going to hit K to go to the last keyframe. And I'm going to take opacity down to 0. And just play it back. Let's see how that feels. I think it's fading a little too fast for me. This one. So I'm going to take this first keyframe there. And again, you can get in there and like try to drag it with your mouse and nudge it. I always like Alt right just to try 1 frame at a time. I'm going to move it over 2 and just shorten it a little bit. Okay, it's a little better. Again, it's just, again, all on feel. There's a lot of subjective personal taste here. But you can drag your keyframes around just to kind of see what's working for you. Let's do a really fast one. So that one is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a 4 frame fade out. I think it looks okay. I'll go with that. Okay, so we've made one perfect one. We want to just duplicate it a bunch and make different sizes and shapes and kind of throw these all over the screen. To duplicate a layer, select the layer and hit Command D or Control D on a PC. And I now, using your selection tool, I have a second firework here. I'm going to change the color just to start mixing things up. Make that red. I'm going to duplicate that one. Pull it over here. Click on the layer, Command D or Control D. I'm going to make this one green. You guys see the where we're heading here? Just so you can see them, because right now they're on top of each other. I'm just using the selection tool to pull it up to somewhere else. Go back to your selection tool. It's the very first one. Again, hit your shape layer, Command or Control D will duplicate it, and then selection layer to pull it off. Let's make a white one. Okay, so right now they're all doing exactly the same thing. But fireworks are not always synchronous like this, right? We should drag these around in time and let them kind of burst off like boom, 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 boom. And to do that, it's as easy as clicking on your layer. And so we have our timeline here of all the same exact timing. If I want this second one here, like the red one, to start a little later, I'm going to pull its layer. Literally, I just clicked and dragged it to the right. I'm just going to do that for all these, actually. And so that will just change the timing. boom, 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 boom. So now it's more sequential. Let's hope we get the Olympics in LA, right? I also like a variety of sizes. Right now they're all the same. They're all going from 0 to 100 in the scale. Maybe some of them should go 0 to 50. They'll be like little smaller fireworks. So go into your scale keyframes and make the last one 50 instead of 100. And you can just kind of go to town and cover the entire screen with a ton of fireworks like that. And take all of those layers. If I select all my layers and hit Command D, that will duplicate all 5 of the layers. And if I slid those down in time and move them offset, maybe I rotate them all. It's just a bunch of layers, a bunch of new fireworks. Like you can go nuts with this. Work on the variety of colors and timing and sizes. Let's do it again. No, that's not what I wanted. It's going crazy. Yeah, I just kept duplicating layers and dragging them around. Well, that's one thing I do love about After Effects is that I don't have to have any exterior artwork already created. There's a lot of cool stuff you can just make within a program. Like we just took a circle, mess with its stroke and the timing of it, and suddenly we just can kind of have these cool little, what I call them, you'll hear them called secondary animations. They're just kind of like flares that brighten up little pieces. Like that wouldn't be your animation, like you wouldn't turn it in, but you might add these circle things to stuff, you know, words, or, you know, like somebody opens a box and like just confetti flying out kind of stuff, and you could add these to that. But those little details add that extra layer of like, I'm not just making motion, I'm creating animated like things that add to it and kind of change that experience for somebody. Any questions on these? In essence, we took a circle and we keyframed its stroke and its size. And that's like just those two things, and that's how you could do something as simple as that. Again, conceptually very simple, and once you start getting in practice and After Effects, you're like, oh, I know how to do exactly all these tiny little things that can kind of build up to building a kind of whole array of different things happening at once that kind of show off and get to have a lot of fun with that. Let's move on to the next cool little thing. I don't know what these are called either. I call them firework lines because I'm just obsessed with fireworks. I'm going to start a new composition just to get a blank slate. Cool, I hit all that stuff. That's great. Okay, so the next tool, which will rack your brain and kind of frustrate you to no end because you're going to mess it up, and that's just how it goes in these particular programs, is the pen tool. So we're not going to do anything too crazy with this. I just want you to draw a line with it. So click on that pen tool and click your start point and your end point. That's all I want you to do right now. So here's the pen tool. I click that first point. I'm going to come over here, click my second point, and I now have a line. By default, it left the stroke at the last firework I made and the last color of that firework. which is white, and 33. That's fine with me. I'm always annoyed at this end of the line. It's called a butt cap, and I like the round cap. So let me show you where you change that. Drill down in your shape layer. Again, you want to be able to see the line options here, and that's always shape layer, contents, shape, path, stroke, fill. Like all these are your options for your line. The end of a line is called the line cap. And right now you can see it's at the butt cap.
Round cap.
Give me the round cap. And that gives us just a nice, much smoother end of the line.
So where's that?
Keep drilling down in your shape layer. It's under content, shape, stroke. Line cap.
Which one of these are? Oh, line.
Yeah, and I chose round. Okay, so we have a line, all right? What we want to do with this line is have it not just be a line. We want it to animate across the screen and kind of from start to finish, like it's a shape that's being chased down this path. And so I tricked you guys into, you did make a line, I promise, but actually you made a path for our line to follow. We want this path and to use the path of that line to make the line kind of run along it. So the way to do that is under contents on your shape layer, you'll see this add with a little play window there. Trim paths. So when you add trim paths, it'll bring up a few new options for you under there. So here's my trim paths. Did that do it for there? Yeah. So drop down there, and it has, by default, it has start, end, and offset. You can drag these around to kind of see what they do. You can start to get a hint of what we're going to do. So the start is at 0, the end is at 100. And if you pull those down, you can see that you can kind of imagine, oh, if I animated / if I keyframed the end and the start, I could have that line kind of shoot across the screen. And trim paths, it's under contents, this add over here. So let's add some keyframes and see if we can animate just a shorter version of this line as it follows along that path. So let's, again, we're at the very first frame. I'm going to add a keyframe to the start and the end. I'm going to go forward. I always go forward 2 seconds just to have it long enough to see. It's probably going to be too slow. I'm going to add another keyframe to start and end. You'll find we actually don't need all of these because right now nothing is happening. I need my end because I want to start with no line and then I want it to move across the screen. So if I go to my first frame, I want to take my end all the way down so that it actually starts with 0 line. And then as I go down, you'll see the end is racing up towards 100%, which is fine. But at the end, all we end up with is the line. We need our start keyframe to kind of chase after the end so that it's not just going to end up at 0 the whole time. We actually would want our start to end up at 100 so that it kind of chased from behind. And as you drag the last keyframe for start up to 100, you'll kind of get a sense of what's going to happen there. And you'll notice they're both going 0 to 100, which means nothing is happening. And that is because when the start and end are the same number, there's no line because they're both moved. Like you're pulling in, it's like kind of like cropping, like you're cropping the left and the right to the exact same percentage. And so of course there's not going to be any line because you cropped them all the same. Start and end have to be different numbers. The only time start and end should be the same number is at the end or the beginning when you want there to be no line, because that's what that means. So let's go back to the start. Actually, I'm going to go to the end. How do I want to do this? Is that what it is? Yeah. So I'm offsetting my keyframes, right? Because that's one thing, that's one way to make sure start and end are not exactly the same. I pulled my end out a little so that as I go through, my start is getting ahead of my end. And so you can kind of start getting confused about what's happening here, because your start percentage is getting ahead of your end percentage. Let's move it the other way. See how it shrinks as it goes too? It's super weird. Ideally, you want it to kind of get to a certain length and then stay that length as it goes across. And that just takes some fiddling with the numbers and the keyframes. So 0. So depending on how long you want your line to be, like right now, end is 10% more than my start. That kind of needs to be consistent through the whole thing, and it's not going to happen as is because start is going from 0 to 100, end is going from 10 to 100. They're just different scales. So just, again, it starts getting a little confusing. It's all about messing with the keyframes and the numbers. Hang on, not that one. And it's very slow. Again, as I said, 2 seconds was going to be way too slow for me. I'm going to take my last 2 keyframes and pull them into 1 second. It's a little better. And just messing with your numbers and getting a sense for what works for you, what you're after. I just bounce these around. Okay. There's different kinds of lines based on the different order of keyframes and the numbers. All that is super confusing, just to show you that there's an easier way to do it after the fact. I always like to show the manual annoying way. Number 1, I'm going to show you the other easy way. So delete those keyframes for start and end. And for the start and end numbers here, go ahead and pick how long you want your line to be as it goes across the screen, right? So that's basically having start at 0 and your end at whatever's comfortable for you, maybe 25. So right now no animating is happening, but I've created just a 25% version of that line. And this is what the last option is, offset. So if you drag offset, you can see that it's going to fly through that animation for you and kind of do what we wanted to already. So let's do this the old-fashioned way, or the new-fashioned way, I don't know. Add a keyframe on offset. I'm going to go forward to the 2-second mark again. I'm going to add another keyframe on offset. And how many times do we want that line to shoot through there? You can do it 1 time in those 2 seconds, and that'll just be that very slow line there. And it's looping now just because that's my work area. That's actually only shooting across the screen once, just to show you. And it always is going to end up where you started if you did 1 time exactly, because this is almost like a rotation in that if you want the line to end, you have to kind of put it through. So now I'm going through more options. Yeah, that's another one. The faster you get, the more you'll kind of lose track of the animation. There's 6 times. Again, firework lines. Cool idea, right? Let's take it one step further. I'm going to draw a circle. Again, it's going to remember the last firework circle we did, which is fine. You can add a trim path to a shape. So let's add trim paths to that circle. And I can do that same thing with the offset. So like start and end 0.25. And I can have my offset. Now suddenly I can have this kind of rotating clock look to that circle. Let me turn off the line.
How did you make it?
Yeah, so when you add the trim paths, change your end so that it's not 100%, and that will not fill up the entire circle. So I made mine 20.
It still has like a
It's not a...
line through the middle.
Oh, that's just the line from your shape layer. You can turn that off just with the eyeball.
No, not the whole thing is like.
I just want to see the circle do its thing.
No, but my circle has like a curve and then a line, like not.
Not to do with your line. You have a fill, that's why. Turn off your fill.
My line like bounces
Bouncing back and forth.
Has the fill.
That's so
Yeah.
strange.
Is it like pausing?
kind of.
All I did was like I shrunk my work area to the specific like key and
It doesn't have a fill.
Let me see that. It might be related to the shape.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do with your keyframes. It doesn't have to do with your keyframes.
It's like setting, I feel like.
No, Juliana, no. It's too tempting, I know.
Why is the flop? Do you make more dramatic movements when you help her?
What do you need from me? Anger? Impatience? I don't know, I'm not doing it for this guy. So your original, I'm gonna have to investigate.
Although we can like smile and shit.
Let's not investigate. We can be doing that for 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Are you having a bouncing thing? I have no idea what I'm doing right now.
Oh.
Strategy to
I
shrink
had it, and then
the white
I
stroke.
don't know.
That's based on your end percentage. So I can make it longer or shorter.
Oh, so okay, this is where you trim. Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the trim pad. That's super fast. Let's go 3 times around. Guess what? You can do it with a square too. You can already see I'm kind of building a cassette tape kind of cool look here. Again, all those kind of little animation things that are just built out of simple shapes that, you know, if you just like, now that you know what trim path does for you, you can add that here and there to different things. There's one more thing with trim path I want to do, and this is generally becomes pretty useful. You'll see it a lot in kind of social media stuff or commercials that have graphics. I'm going to start a new composition.
Sorry, just a question.
Yeah.
When I edit, it just keeps editing the first shape, not the second. How do I go to the second?
It depends which one has been added. When you hit add trim path, that's going to add whatever shape you're on.
Yeah.
If if you want to add your shape as a new layer instead of as part of that layer, because you want it to always be separate.
Okay.
Because if I add more shapes to this layer, it's going to add the trim path to all those shapes.
So how do you make sure it's a separate layer?
Click off of the layer, so you want to create a new shape on its own layer.
Oh, I see.
And now when I add the trim paths, it's just going to do that one shape instead of all the shapes on that layer.
Click off the layer.
Just click down like in gray area. Yeah, the selection tool, and then make sure, because you can select layers that way, but you want to select no layers, so just click off into nothingness. There's also deselect, but I just don't bother. Okay, so that's trim paths with a line with some shapes. I'm going to show you how to do this to trim path, paint over a word, and have that word kind of show up as though you were writing that word. This is advanced stuff. I think we got enough time to get through it. So let's start a new composition and just see how we do with it. So number one, introduce another tool here is the text tool, the horizontal type tool. Click on that, and it's just like most Photoshop or Illustrator. If you just click on your composition and then type. I'm just going to go with the word hi for now, because the more letters you do, the longer it's going to take. And as in all Adobe programs, it's hard to get out of the text typing mode. The shortcut in After Effects is Command Enter, and that's like, hey, I'm done typing, commit those letters to that layer. You could also click the selection tool to just get out of text mode. Enter text mode, so hit the text tool and just click on the, yeah, in the middle of composition. Allow. So it depends on how lazy I am. If I hit Command Enter, that's usually what I do just to stay with the keyboard. Or just click the selection tool, and that'll get you out of text mode so that you can now move your text around. One thing I want to say about this one is the more complex your font, the harder this is to do. But it can still be done, and it's very cool. It's just going to take a little longer. This font I chose just Arial Narrow, just because it's very simple straight lines, just for today, just to show you how to do the effect. You might want to go with Arial Narrow yourselves, just for right now. Okay, so that's my text layer. I want to add some lines with my pen tool that cover that text, kind of like tracing it. So again, I'm going to do this on its own layer. So click your pen tool. Make sure you're not selected at your type layer tool. Make sure you're going to create a new shape layer. And using my pen tool, I'm going to click a line to kind of start tracing over my words. So that's my first line. I didn't quite get it. Once you draw the 2 points of your line, you can use the arrows to nudge it left and right. But that's just nudging that last point I made. So just like multiple selecting, if you hold shift, you can also select that top point, and that also hold shift. And now I can move both points at once. And the pen tool, again, the pen tool is kind of like your greatest enemy and your nemesis, but also your best friend once you narrow him down and become buddies. It's all about organizing your points and getting them in the right place. And there's so many shortcuts for the pen tool. There's like holding shift, there's holding alt for curves, there's command to like move stuff around. Like, yeah.
When I use the pen tool, for some reason it's doing this.
start from scratch. Draw a new line. You just want 2 points.
So to move it, you press shift, you said?
To move it, you need to select both points. And the pen tool is, once you put the pen tool on, you click one point and you have to hold shift to select or deselect the other point. So again, you kind of got to pay attention to what it's, excuse me. When I hold shift, you can see it's turning on and off that point. You want it selected, and that's when it's kind of filled up more. So now I have both points selected, and I can nudge this around.
How come I have a circle at the bottom? I don't have a square.
I don't know.
Square at the top and a circle at the bottom.
It might be in how you made your line. If you start from scratch, just draw a line. 1 point, 2 points. Bam. When things start getting weird in After Effects and you're not doing what you want, delete it and start over and do exactly what you need to do. Yes? So the point of this is to use this line to cover the font behind it. And right now you can see my line is not quite wide enough to cover the H. I need to make my stroke bigger to actually cover the width of my H. No, don't do that. Okay. Katie's super busy. So we've made a line over that first line of our H, right? Good? I want to make more lines to cover the rest of high. And I want them all to be in this shape layer. So this is an instance where I do want to have a new line in the same shape layer. So make sure you click on your shape layer first with the selection tool. Then go to your pen tool. And when you draw a new line, it's going to add it to that same layer. The thing to be particular with the pen is that it's going to want to add a point to your first line. Make sure you're to the left a little so you're actually creating a point, a new line's first point outside of that first line. So now I just drew a line across the middle of my H. And if you miss, you can kind of click and drag and pull that last point just to make sure you're covering the entire H. It's okay if you go a little outside past the H. Oops. Nope. So you can see I can kind of pull that line out. So now we have two lines, and you know you did it right if your shape layer contents has, well, it should just be 2. I don't know what 2 is. I have a dummy shape here. Let me get rid of it. You can copy a shape from another shape layer and paste it into this one if you did mess up. So I'll draw a third line to cover the last part of the H there. 1, 2. That's under stroke. If you drill down, line cap. I want to say for this, it doesn't actually matter because you're going to be using these lines as just a mask that's going to reveal the font behind it. And then one more line for the I. So again, this doesn't have to be perfect because I'm just wanting my lines to cover the high of that font, and then you're going to tell the font, use whatever's covering me as a reveal, kind of like a inverse mask thing we're going to do in a second here. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but this is going to use the add trim paths for all of these shapes. So once you've drawn a line over all of the letters, again, I chose high because it was 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. You could see you could be doing this all day long if you kind of had like a cool reel and you're like, I want my name to show up. Like Justin Edwards, that's like 15 letters and that's going to take forever. So again, I'm going to add, with that shape layer, I'm going to add trim paths. Trim paths are like everything for this kind of little stuff like this. Okay. Interesting. All right. And this is going to control how your letter is going to be animated on. I'm not even doing anything yet. I'm just messing with the end because I want the end to be 0 and then 100. So depending on how long I want my text to take, I'm going to start the first frame, keyframe the end at 0. I'm going to move forward 2 seconds again just to give myself plenty of time and take my end to 100. And that's the reveal. That's what the reveal is going to do. It's very slow. My middle H line is reversed. That's kind of silly, but I don't know. We'll see how it ends up. Okay. And then the last step. So I've got it. It's going to animate in this way. We're going to go back to our font layer where it actually is still the text layer. And we're going to use this options here under track mat. So what this track mat is going to do, it's going to say, go look at something else as a mask. And since we're going to tell it to use our lines we just animated, it's going to, since it's going to look at that mat and it's an animated mat, it's going to be revealed in that way. So just pick that first option, alpha mat shape layer 1. And now when you play back, it's revealing your font in the same way that you drew your lines.
So if you're having trouble finding the track mat, go down to the bottom to the toggle switches modes button, because track mat isn't.
It's not always there.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think you've actually got like a full view of all of the options. So if you don't have a track mat, underneath where you've got all the information about your layer and you've been messing with your
It's this tiny one here. Expand or collapse the transfer control pane. That includes the track mat.
Yeah, and if you don't have enough room on your screen for everything and you just want to do the condensed version, there's a toggle switches modes at the bottom, and that'll flip you in between what you kind of see by default and then where you can get to your track mats.
So I'm speeding things up a little. I just dragged my end keyframe sooner. And there's some troubleshooting you'll want to do based on the lines you drew. So it's this, for me anyways, I don't like how the middle part of the H has that extra tag on the top and bottom there. That's because my stroke was too wide for that line. I can go into that line and shrink, and I know it's this shape here. So I'm going to go in and shrink its stroke just a little bit. Shape 3. Just to lose that top and bottom extra part there. It's still there in the end. Let me see. Lots of tweaking. Just get used to like nothing being perfect the first time ever, and you'll have learned After Effects. With a shape selected, you can also nudge it 1 pixel up or down, and that can kind of adjust its placement. My path was a little off there. That's why it's not quite working for me. Almost. A little better. Part of the problem with this one is that it's doing both letters at the same time. If you want to do one letter at a time, guess what? You've got to do one letter at a time. You've got to take a type layer that has H, a type layer that has I, a type layer that has your name broken up. Each single letter is going to get its own layer because each layer needs its own, what we did that track mat thing. Each letter needs its own alpha mat. So if you can kind of take this and extenuate it into like what it actually ends up looking like, you might spend a day or two just animating your name onto a screen. But that's just what it takes. And that's the cool little tools you got. There are plugins that kind of like auto do this for you, and you can skip all of that. But again, I always like to show the manual way so that you can do those exact tweaks that serve your purposes instead. Any questions about this stuff? It's kind of combining a few of our things so far. We've got trim paths. We've added a track mat alpha thing to it all. Shapes, lines. We can move on to the next little thing if we want. We got time just for one more. And next week we're going to bring a lot of this together and actually just do a project together from start to finish, or from start to however far we get. So hopefully it'll all live in one composition that you can take away, seeing how it all comes together for you. Okay, so we're done with that. Let's start a new composition for our last little silliness. Hope you guys feel like you're learning a lot, because we're cramming a lot into these 2 hours. Bunch of little tiny tools, but keep practicing and they'll stay with you. Okay, so for starters, let's draw a curved line that can kind of serve as like a roller coaster maybe, or like a hill. And to do that, we'll start with our pen tool on a blank canvas. And I'm just going to start plotting points. So like my first point is here. I'm going to go up a hill here. And for those unfamiliar with the pen tool, when you click a new point and hold on to that click and start pulling on it, that's how you make a curve. So that's what I'm going to do for this, because I want it to not to be straight lines, because I could just go bam, 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 create some mountains. I want these points here to be curved, and I can do that after the fact, like right now. Getting to know the pen tool, it's just part of it. With the pen tool, you can go up to any point and hold Alt and add a curve to it. So I'm holding Alt, and now I'm clicking and dragging on that point, and now I can create the curve for my roller coaster. No. And it can get really stubborn for you and want to like finish a shape for you like that, or jump around. If you want to get out of the pen tool, click on the selection tool, and you just want to select that point at the front, then you can select that point. And now I can do it. Because once the pen, why is it doing that? Once the pen tool is active, it's going to want to complete a shape for you if that's what you're up to. Otherwise, you need to go back to the selection tool, just say like, let the pen tool just be the line I made. And then you can come back in and edit those points. So that's one way to make the shapes. I can do the pen tool and create those curves as I go. Again, I'm just kind of clicking and dragging as I go, and that kind of does the same thing. And then after, I can kind of go in and adjust my points. Cool roller coaster. All right, whatever. Okay, so I did the same thing with you guys. We drew this line. What we actually did was draw a path that we want to assign something to. So let's go find something silly to ride this roller coaster. I have the new Zelda, so I've been playing a lot of Zelda. So I'm going to make Link go on there. Just his head. I like this one here. Hope I don't have to teach you how to Google image search. I'm going to bring Link into my project file, so I can just grab his head and put it in my project.
Isn't that also with the squares and shapes? Holding shift, even when you're just normally scaling, keeps the proportions constrained. So it keeps you from stretching things out.
And I'm going to pull Link down and add him to my timeline, so I'm just going to pull him down there. Right now he's just huge and in the center, which is fine to start with. I'll take his scale down a bit. He's going to ride this roller coaster. Sorry, come back. Okay. So this is a very handy thing to do if you have something you want to move around the screen a certain way. Just draw that path first. And after then, you can assign something to the path. Don't try to take your object and then use position to move it around the screen, because that will just never be more infuriating. It's always easier to draw the line for the path you want first, and then just slap on your object, say like, hey, just follow that line I drew. And this is how we do that. So under that shape layer for that line we drew, why are there two? There's always a random extra guy there. Okay.
You just drag the image to the screen.
I pulled that file and just pulled him down into the timeline, and it added him like that. And I shrunk him a little.
Did you import the file, or?
Yeah, I just grabbed it from the web.
Okay.
So what we want to do is we want to copy that path and paste it in the position, in my case, of Link's head. So I'm on the first frame of my animation. I click on my line's path, and I hit Command C, Control C. I'm copied that path. You may not see anything happening. That's fine. You want to come down to then your object that you want to put on that path. Go to its position and Command V to paste it, and it didn't work. Okay. You have to actually click not just path 1, but the path word itself, just this part here. So contents, shape, path 1, path. Then click on that. That's what you copy. Then when you go down to position, when you paste it, it automatically applies an animated path. And what that's doing is it's taking your path's points and creating keyframes for you. And again, I can hide the roller coaster now if I just want to see his head moving around. And
That motion just happened doing that across the screen like a bunch of edges.
like just duplicate him.
You can duplicate it the same way we duplicated the, yeah, oh.
Yeah, and I can take the position and have some higher and lower. I know it's Link's head right now, but you can imagine like butterflies or like anything in the world could go on this path, on any kind of path you create.
So sorry, can you just explain again how did you get it to move along the same line as the
Yeah, I'm not doing anything. It's doing it for me. So on your shape layer, you have to drill down all the way to path. Hit copy. And then go to the position of the shape that you want to apply it to. Click on position because you want to paste it here, and that's where I paste it.
just select position and paste?
Yep.
Alright.
And it's going to paste it on whatever your playhead is. That's why it pasted it a little later in my timeline.
But if you wanted to just have him scale up to the same thing, you could also press it on scale. You can link stuff in.
Get it? Link.
Hey!
Another thing you might want to do, Link's head is perfectly upright and moving from left to right, just up and down basically. You can automatically orient his head to kind of like stay in line with the path. So let's click on Link. It's under Layer Transform, Auto Orient. So this is something like, say you had like, maybe you drew a paper airplane and it's flying around the screen. Right now that paper airplane is just going like, you actually would want the paper airplane to kind of like dive and pitch and go up and kind of rotate with that path. That's what this auto orient can do for you. So again, layer, transform, auto orient. Again, you used to have to do this manually. After Effects does it for you. Look at this option. Orient along path. Hit OK, and now his head is going to follow the path. It's really stupid right now because it's Link's head, but you could put anything there that might make more sense to orient. Like a roller coaster car would be doing that, so that is a more appropriate choice. But I've been playing Zelda, so you got to deal with it. So again, that's animating something across the screen, but not with like manually positioning your keyframes forever. If you have an idea for a path, you have it already, just draw the path, copy the path, paste it into position, and you're done. Like you don't have to sit there and have the headache all day trying to get it perfect.
Why don't you make it go slower along?
If I wanted to make this go slower,
Yeah, just along the same.
I want to pull the keyframes and stretch them. And that was actually earlier. I wanted to show you how to do that. Zoom in there. Yeah, I want to stretch my keyframe, but if I just pulled this keyframe, it's just gonna, well, it is doing it. It's these little ones are circles because I've copied a path in there and it's just auto assigned those next points in there. So if I pull the last keyframe out, it's gonna actually slow down the animation. Now he's taking his time. And let's say like he's not quite off the screen enough at the start and the beginning. I can, hang on, selection tool. I can click this point and pull it off the screen a little more. Click the last point, pull it off a little more.
And that affects the path.
That changes the curves, yeah. So now he completely is off screen, then comes off screen, then goes completely off. So once you have your path pasted in position, you can mess with the points still, and that's, again, it's going to mess with your kind of curves a bit, just be aware of that. But like, say you didn't quite draw the path perfectly the first time, you could still mess with it and not have to go back and redo it all over again. So this is getting a little sillier. Yeah. At the end, that dive is a little too intense. Okay. Any questions or comments? We're just about out of time for today. This will be up. We'll probably get it up by tomorrow or so if you guys want to re-watch and kind of walk through all this stuff again. But next week, let's plan on starting a project together that we're going to kind of build an entire, a little more animation concepts to cover yet, but we're not going to do kind of these one-off little tools. We're actually going to pull everything together and build a cool project that way. Yes?
Just a real quick note, I don't know if we have enough time to go over this, but like how he was clicking and dragging it and they were all moving because it's already a set path. That doesn't necessarily work if you manually keyed it and it's not copied from somewhere else. So just be aware of if you have something that you've been keying, like say for example your fireworks and you want to stretch it out, that's not going to work for something that you've done kind of manually.
Yeah, because these aren't keyframes. These are, I forget what they call them when they're circles. You can turn them into keyframes. Oh, they're called rove across time frames. Super handy. Because it's assuming that you're messing with the length of that path in time. So it's like, I'm going to be flexible and go wherever the first and last keyframe go. You can turn them into regular keyframes if you would like. But again, it kind of takes away that automated feature that is happening for us right now. But
So it won't move along the line.
it'll still move along the line. It's just the timing will be different, and you're going to have to suddenly start babysitting every single keyframe yourself.
Faster than slower right now.
Yeah, and that might be what you want to do. Yeah, because you can make him go like slowly up the hill because it's like a roller coaster, and then faster down, and then slowly up. Like all those things you have to do manually though. So great, thank you guys. Hope to see a lot of you next week. We'll see how many of you make it past the finish line. Thank you, Katie, so much. That was a help.